In 2013, a woman named Doris Stauffer died after a long and difficult battle against dementia. Her son, who had cared for her in her final years, Jim, wanted to donate her body to help researchers understand and possibly find a cure for Alzheimer's disease. Doris's family reached out to the Biological Resource Center, a nearby company that brokers cadavers to scientific researchers. I guess the name Corpses R Us was already taken. 10 days after the body of his beloved mother was donated, her ashes were returned. But what our hero Jim didn't know, though, was that the ashes were only from one of Doris's detached hands, and that the rest of her corporeal remains were shipped to a U.S. Army research facility where she was strapped into a chair and blown up. Why? Now, this is actually a very famous story, and there's a good chance you've already heard of it before. And I'm not here to talk about the incredibly unregulated and hilariously shady business of selling cadavers to brokers. Maybe some other time, but right now I'm talking about why the Army would want to do that in the first place. In what scenario did the Army have an interest in blowing this guy's dead mom up? And is your mom next? See, this was back in 2013. And in the wars of Iraq and Afghanistan, IEDs were all the rage, and the DoD needed a better way to protect troops driving around in vehicles from roadside explosions. Yes, you can use a crash test dummy of sorts, but these are limited in how accurately they can recreate the truly horrific pink misting of a human being. In this video, I want to talk about how the military crash tests its equipment. How do we know that things like the ballistic vests that we had to wear are actually going to stop a bullet? How do I know that the gas mask that I'm wearing will stop chemical agents from liquefying my lungs? And how do I know that the artillery strike that I called in won't lead to two guys in dress uniforms visiting my mom? See, the military, just like any other giant bureaucracy, has to do its own safety testing. But the military does it in ways that would up my pucker factor to 11. See, when I was a wee lad of 18, I was once tossed an old IBA vest with plates that I'm sure were definitely not up to spec and told to run around in the woods with my equally poorly trained friends who were shooting machine guns around me. I knew that theoretically the body armor I was wearing would stop an incoming round for the most part, but I only knew that because that's what I was told, and that's what they printed on the actual plate itself. But how did the people who put that sticker there know that the plate would stop the bullet, and that if need be, it would help prevent my body from having any more holes than necessary? After some serious sleuthing, and by that I mean just being more specific with what I typed into the Google search bar, I found that the primary contractor of these bullet-resistant plates is Ceradyne Incorporated, owned by 3M. No, sorry, vertically integrated with 3M. These guys do a lot more than just make body armor, but we're not here to talk about the new line of alumina ceramic lined steel tubes they have on sale. No, we are talking about SAPI plates, which stands for Small Iron Protective Inserts. Now, there are things called eSAPI or enhanced SAPI plates, but those are just like thicker and they're made of the same material, so we're just going to combine the two for the sake of this video. SAPI plates are basically just expensive kitchen tiles wrapped with expensive plastic and held together with composite materials. That is to say, ceramic plating consisting of boron carbide, silicon carbide, and aluminum oxide with a high density polyethylene incorporated within it. The idea with plates is twofold: stop the round from coming any further towards my precious bodily organs and disperse the energy over a wider area so that my heart and lungs don't explode. I joke that they're just fancy kitchen tiles, but if you ever actually broken one, they make the same sound as when Link goes into like some poor innocent stranger's house. Now, you might have heard about NIJ levels in reference to how much a ballistic vest will protect you here on YouTube, where people talk about level 2, level 3, and jokingly ask ATF agents if they have level 4 plates, but the military doesn't actually use these. Instead, the DoD uses the V50 Ballistic Test for Armor standard, which is published by Aberdeen Proving Grounds and the MIL-STD/662F. This is an exhaustive list of penetrating powers of basically any round that you could expect to be coming at you from enemy small arms. The military basically asks, what is the largest, most powerful round we can realistically stop with personal body armor? And it was decided the answer to that would be the 30-06 M2 AP round, which is larger than pretty much 90% of what troops get shot at with before you start entering the area of anti-material rifles. The general rating you'll find on military plates is that they're able to stop 5 rounds fired out of an AK or one 30 caliber round fired out of something like an SVD rifle or something like that. The reason we can only really stop one is that ceramic plates are designed to shatter, as this helps with dispersing the force of the shot, but also means that once they're busted, you really have no idea of how many or what kinds of rounds they can stop at that point, if any at all. This is why if you've ever been issued a plate and you drop it on a hard surface, you will probably get yelled at because there's a slight chance that it's going to crack the plate, which then reduces how much it can actually protect you. And we've come a long way in terms of personal body armor, because back in the day, anything went. You're still going to find people doing really dumb stuff stuff with body armor on the internet, so this is just my legal disclaimer to say don't try any of this at home. But what if we're not trying to stop an AK round? What if we're trying to stop a 125mm Sabo round going at you and all your buddies while you're chilling inside of a tank? See, there's almost a sort of arms race between armored vehicles and the weapons designed to blow up said armored vehicles, and this goes all the way back to World War I with the invention of anti-tank rifles against the very first tanks on the battlefield. In World War II, the strategy was largely just angle the plates and make them thick, but as anti-tank munitions evolved, so too did the materials of the armor itself, and with it, the complexity of their designs and testing. See, you can't really just slap unlimited amounts of armor onto a vehicle and call it a day. I mean, you can, it's not going to work how you want it to. You got to be smarter than that. Tanks these days have 3 different kinds of protection that they'll use. You have the armor that's part of the vehicle itself. You have supplementary armor, which can be a full upgrade package like the husk system or makeshift ones like cope cages. And then finally, you have active protection like the trophy system. If you're a kid playing the Modern Warfare 2 campaign and you were ever curious how that striker just blew up RPGs in midair, the answer was trophy system. I always thought it was just plot armor. Now, when gauging how tough armor on a tank is and how powerful an anti-tank round is, we use what's called HRS, or homogeneous rolled steel. Whenever you see anti-tank rounds being tested, you'll hear claims that it can punch through X amount of homogeneous rolled steel, which is literally just a plate of solid steel made to certain specifications. The thing is, though, the armor on tanks isn't just solid slabs of steel, so why do we use that as the benchmark for armor testing? See, Abrams these days use the latest generation of Shabam armor, a wonderful invention from our friends over the pond, made up of a classified combination of ceramics, metal matrices, depleted uranium, and elastic materials. The reason we use homogeneous rolled steel is that it's a baseline metric that we can use against everything else, and it's significantly cheaper and simpler to do. Let's say I have a foot of armor plating that's twice as strong as homogeneous rolled steel. Now let's say an enemy military has a weapon that can punch through 18 inches of homogeneous rolled steel. This means that it'll only punch through 9 inches of my armor, leaving 3 inches left, which is way more than enough. 3 inches is a lot. But very cool, you tell yourself, but how do I actually know it's going to keep me from having to experience what it's like to be inside of an onion volcano at the local hibachi place? Answer: test operations procedures, or TOPS. These are how the military tests basically every piece of equipment imaginable, from truck winches to literal robots, and these are published by the Army Test and Evaluation Command. Now, the one covering tank armor is TOP 2-2-712, which is a classified document which hasn't been leaked on a War Thunder forum yet, but there are a few adjacent products that I was able to scrounge up for you all because I love you and I want you to be well informed. This paper from the Army Research Laboratory talks about different methods of manufacturing vehicle armor and how each one performed. Now, I'm not even going to pretend like I know what half of these graphs mean, but luckily they did include pictures of pieces of metal with holes in them for us smooth-brained, simple-minded folk. To put it in normal English, they essentially took a bunch of metal plates of varying thickness and shot at them from different angles to determine what the ideal size and shape of these plates would be in order to stop an incoming round. And these actually use the same VF-50 tests as ballistic vests too. But as Oppenheimer said, theory only gets you so far, and once you get all the nerdy graph shit out of the way, it then comes time to shoot rockets at tanks. Now hear me out. If I was in charge of the people whose job it was to shoot rockets at tanks to see if they blew up or not, I would have a cool name. Something like the Defense Kinetic Group or the Armor Protection Team. But no, these guys call themselves the Vulnerability Community. What soft-handed beta came up with that? That's like what your boomer uncle calls the students at UCLA. And they're not helping their case by using phrases like various phenomenologies and stochastic models. The paper I'm referencing is actually when they were shooting different kinds of ammunition at a test M1 tank. But you wouldn't know that based on the truly awful pictures they used to showcase it. Now, to determine how tough the tank actually is, each component of the Abrams is listed as either vital or non-vital, meaning if something gets taken out, how important is it actually to the function of the tank in combat? So if the enemy shoots off your headlight, you're probably going to be okay. If they take out the engine, you might have some issues, and if the turret just completely pops off, you might as well just go home at that point. And this is called the Standard Danger Assessment List. The actual live fire test itself is basically just shooting around at the tank and seeing what happens. After the tank gets hit, all the vital components are checked to see how damaged they are and how effective the tank is after some break and some don't. And this gives what's called the Combat Utility Rating. Think of it as like health percentage in a video game. There's a lot that goes into this, like how destroying one component can wipe a tank, or just barely damaging a series of components would do the same effect. But ultimately, it's a rating of can the vehicle fight or not. Once you have shot your fancy prototype tank to hell and back, you then determine if the armor on it is strong enough to protect these sleep-deprived nicotine addicts that are peeing in bottles and playing Would You Rather for hours on end. What about things that aren't as cut and dry? Because it's pretty easy to say vest vest worked because guy's not dead, and tank armor worked because tank no-go exploding. What about the MOPP suits that are supposed to protect you from nerve gas? Now, the current set of suits that we have now were developed under the J's List program in the 90s. Testing to see if the suits actually worked was simple enough. Conducted at the Natick Soldier Research, Development and Engineering Center and Edgewood Chemical Biological Center. Jesus, that's a mouthful. The material of the suits was first tested to see if agents could penetrate the material in harsh environments. Then prototype suits were given to soldiers to conduct field training to see how well they kept up with movement and debris. Interestingly enough, stopping chemical agents was the easy part. The hard part was making sure that the soldiers inside of said suits did not die of heat stroke. In fact, it was such an issue that in 1998, they commissioned a research paper on it. They took two groups of soldiers. The first group acted as the control and performed a series of tasks inside of an air-conditioned laboratory. The second group, who were volunteered to join probably the worst working detail ever, were sent to Yuma Proving Grounds in Arizona in the middle of the summer, where historical weather reports say that they experienced temperatures of 124 degrees that year. Just throw the kids in a volcano at that point. They won't have to suffer as long. Oh, but wait, it does get worse. The soldiers were then told to exercise for extended periods of time in order to push them close to heat illness for testing purposes. Once they reached that point, each person was forced to have a thermometer shoved up their ass and then asked a series of questions, including if they identified as being a lazy person or if they viewed themselves as overly apathetic. The results of this test were fairly clear in that yes, a J's List can stop mustard gas, but it's literally giving our troops clinical depression. And so they had to commission lighter materials for the suits. So we have the body armor, we have the tanks, we have the gas masks. How do I ensure that I don't blow myself up on accident? Whenever you call in artillery, there's this thing called a risk estimated distance, or RED. This is essentially how far away you have to be if you want to call in artillery on a target. Without getting too much into the weeds, REDs basically say that at what distance from an explosion can I be with a statistically insignificant chance of getting hit. The general framework of a RED is, and I kid you not, if you took 1,000 people, lined them up in a perfect circle around an explosion and determined at what distance away only one of them will catch a zinger or shrapnel to the face. Fancy way of saying that the hit probability would be 0.1% or lower. Anytime the DoD comes up with a fancy new warhead type, they have to conduct dozens if not hundreds of tests by setting up a series of sensors and targets at various ranges and firing every imaginable combination and permutation of warhead, charge, and fuse type with it. Things like weather conditions, available cover, and terrain all have to be taken into account because these all have effects on how far shrapnel will bounce around. Of course, if you're a hero at the end of the movie, this does not concern you at all. Similar things are done on naval ships that test how well they can handle the forces of explosions, and there are even REDs for nukes out there if you can find them. Now, obviously, I was not able to address how everything was safety rated, and as much as I would like to talk about the fire-resistant properties of the issue tighty-whities, or how the answer to make parachutes safe is to just use 2 parachutes, all this stuff was open source. So I will just tell you what your aunt who doesn't vaccinate her kids will tell you, and to do your own research. But if there's something you wanted me to cover in this video, but I didn't, let me know in the comments. I'm open to doing a part 2 to this. Thanks for watching, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.